the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, and would like to welcome everyone Wednesday, January the 17th. So if we could get the roll call, please.
Mr. Rappel.
Here.
Dr. Armstrong.
Here.
Mr. Birkin.
Here.
Mr. Castillo.
Here.
Ms. Champagne.
Here.
Dr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Hollis.
Here.
Ms. Holloway. Ms. Bellarine.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Ms. Clifton. Ms. Clifton is not present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we move to the first agenda item.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval.
Do we have a motion?
Motion?
Second. Okay, oh, wait a second, another motion.
Second. Good?
Mr. Morris and Mr. Castillo.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any objection?
Yes, I would like to move that on item 2.1, that we defer consideration of the summary report of waiver requests by local LEAs until our March meeting.
Okay, we have I guess it's a substitute motion. We have a second. Any objection to the, I'm going to restate it. The motion is, the substitute motion is to defer action on this item until the March meeting. Is there any objection?
One second.
Wait, 1 second. We have an important decision.
That's not the consent, yeah. I do not know the oath of office. We're doing the oath first?
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that, sorry.
All right, so we're going to do consideration of the oath of office for the 2024 officers administered by Ms. Nancy Landry, Secretary of State.
Can officers come down?
Okay.
Thank you. Say a few words.
Sure, press this.
While y'all come down, I'd like to say a few words. I just want to commend all of you for your service on this very, very important board. I first ran for office because of my passion for education, and I made education a purpose of my time in the legislature. Can you not hear me? Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. I made education a focus of my time in the legislature, and like many of you here, served on the education committee and chaired the education committee, like Senator Appel and Mr. Harris. And I really want to commend you for what you do here, making sure that every one of our students in Louisiana has a quality education is so important, and it affects every other policy in our state. And I still remain passionate about it. I'll be closely watching what you do. I'm so excited about your new board, and I look forward to seeing all the good work that you do. And I commend you for your commitment and dedication to the children of Louisiana. I'm so honored to swear in your officers today. So if y'all could come over here. We're going to do them all at the same time. So just raise your right hands and say, I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
and the Constitution and laws of this state,
the Constitution and laws of this state,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and will faithfully and impartially discharge
and perform all the duties
all the duties
incumbent on me
incumbent on me
as state your office
as President
of the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, according
of the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, according
to the best of my ability and understanding.
to the best of my ability and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. So much for allowing me the honor to do that. I appreciate it. There you go.
Thank you. Nice to see you, and you're welcome anytime to come back.
Thank you.
Everybody ready? Okay. So,
My apologies, we will go back to the consent agenda. Mr. Morris and Mr. Castile made a motion.
we have a motion, and we have, I believe we have a substitute motion. Not yet.
That was all.
3.1. The LEA records.
We'll get this straight out. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we,
we're addressing the waiver issue right now.
correct, we're back on
And
that.
so we've got a second, and we're opening it up for comment. So if any members have any comment on the motion to defer, now would be the time to comment.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, I'm trying to understand for 2.1 in regards to Ms. Nolan's deferment. It's requested, the recommendation is to receive, so I have a question of why are we deferring if it's to receive the information?
Well, I think-
Somebody clarify that?
Yes, I believe that there's a lot of folks that are concerned that, of the importance of foreign language education, and we'd like a little bit of time to evaluate the exemption requests. That's all. Nothing sinister, just we want to know more about it. Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody in the
Is there a
audience?
second to defer?
I believe okay, there's no one from the audience to speak on it. Shall we, do we have any objection to this substitute motion? There's being no objection, the substitute motion passes. Okay, next.
All right, so your next item is on page 8, and it's going to be item 4.1, consideration of TOTS Tech Early Start Training Providers. The recommendation is to approve as outlined.
Roland? So you have that as 4.1?
I thought you said
4.1 is on the new agenda. Yes, we're on 4.1. Everything got bumped down.
Gotcha, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation, there's no presentation, but the recommendation is to approve these particular providers here. You see them listed, ABC Pelican Chapter, Associated Builders and Contractors, Monroe Electrical, Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee, New Orleans Career Center, Operation Spark. These are providers that work with schools to provide opportunities for students to learn essentially career technical education, vocational craft, and so we recommend their approval.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval. We have a second. Do we have a second? Seconds. Do we have any comment cards? Ms. Jackson, would you like to speak? Please come forward. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Amber Jackson. I work with LSU and PR Bytes as a curriculum developer for STEM for students in the state. And we were looking at the section that pertains to us, the updates for the consideration for STEM Renaissance. It has a list of computing, cybersecurity, digital design, emerging media, but it doesn't say what those recommendations are. And so we're wondering if we can have some further details. There's, all the other sections have little charts of what that job got added. 2.1 does not. 2.1. We're confused what the updates are for that section.
I think is that the next item? That's the next item on the agenda.
Jumpstart pathways?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not this item.
All right, we'll look at it on the next one.
Did the numbers get mixed up?
Yeah, the agenda is revised.
Sorry about that.
Hey, you got me too.
We've got a jumbled up agenda right here. We're working on it.
No, I'm just saying.
Okay. we have anybody from the board have an objection to the motion that's on the floor in the second? There being no objection, the motion carries. Next.
Okay. We'll move to page 11. It's item 4.2, consideration of Jumpstart 2.0 pathway enhancements and fast forward pathways for the 2024-2025 school year. The recommendation is to approve as outlined. Motion to approve.
So moved. Okay, we have a second.
So again, no presentation. However, I would just point out that we're excited about bringing these opportunities to the board. There are some high-quality options for students to participate, get really good training that can lead to jobs beyond high school. Local communities, local school systems have the opportunity to work with partners within their own community to develop these pathways. We think much of this is the future of high schools in the state of Louisiana, and we recommend their approval.
Okay. Anybody want to make a comment? No comments? Do we have any objection to the motion? I'm sorry. Is this the one? Oh, this was the one you wanted to speak to. I'm sorry. Please come up.
Well, basically, I'd like to reiterate everything I already said, but I would like to point out that thank you for doing this, because we agree. This is very important for our students. This is definitely moving education in Louisiana forward in a good way. But yes, on 2.1, the considerations of STEM Renaissance updates. This is section, it lists topics, but this is the section that pertains to us as computing and cybersecurity developers, and we're wondering what those updates are. Because it doesn't have much details, or is there a place we can find the details?
Just about from our team will come forward and provide some information.
60, page 60. Jessica Lungo, Louisiana Department of Education. So what we do for Jumpstart 2.0 enhancements is we bring you the agenda for the Jumpstart 2.0 review committee. So what you're seeing is the agenda that we brought to that review committee in November. In regards to the STEM Renaissance, what we've done with the Renaissance is really just streamline the pathways. We've made no changes, all of the changes, no substantial changes. The only thing we did was communication changes, the way the layout of the pathway looked. So we have not made any actual changes to the pathway. Again, just the way in which we communicate the pathway to the field. And all of our partners were consulted. So LSU, who is one of our partners, was consulted on those changes. PLTW was consulted, and cyber.org were all consulted. And they agree with the changes we made in regards to communication.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any objection to that? There is no objection, the motion carries.
Your next item is on page 19, item 5.1, consideration of an update report regarding literacy and key performance indicators. The recommendation is to receive.
We have a whole bunch of motions.
I'd like to offer a substitute motion. Given the time constraints that we have today and trying to make sure that we cover all the actionable items in the agenda, discussed with Superintendent Brumley ahead, and I want to make a motion to see if we could defer this item until February's retreat, where we can also consider adding a math component to it. So there are no actionable items on this, it's an update only. Correct. If we defer to the next meeting, and we'd also be able to get an update on developments within math as well.
Okay, so we have seconds, everyone second. So does anyone wish to speak, any of the audience, anybody wish to speak to this? So do we have any objections to this substitute motion? No objection being heard, the motion carries.
Your next item is on page 37, item 6.1, consideration of an update report regarding early childhood care and education advisory council membership. The recommendation is to approve the membership as outlined.
presentation?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion, we have a second? Second. Second down there. Okay, anybody in the audience wish to speak to this? Nobody. So we will, I ask if there's any objection to the motion. There being no objection, the motion carries.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I recognize.
Yes, sir, thank you. I'd also like to speak to this one and share with the public, all of our stakeholders, at this discussion with board members, that with this item, we have started the process to review the city committee members that are so important to the input to this board, and we value the input from each and every one of those committees. And this board is looking forward to the opportunity to engage with those committees. We're currently in the process of reviewing membership of those committees. So we were able to do that today with early childhood education. We've completed the review with non-publics, and we're in the process of reviewing membership and all the others with this board having an opportunity to look at those membership. So with that, we're looking at the remaining councils and panels. That would include 8G Advisory Council, Superintendent's Advisory Council, Special Education Advisory Council, Accountability Council, MFE Task Force, and the English Language Learner Task Force. We would look for Superintendent Brown. I'd like to direct you for LDOE to bring recommendation for the BESI appointed members to the March meeting of the Business Administration and Finance Committee for consideration as new membership appointees. And also, the BESI office and LDOE will support BESI officers and chair of the Administration and Finance Committee to select a revised membership of the MFP Task Force. This will be in advance of the 2024 MFP Task Force meeting, and the 2024 membership will be approved upon signature of the board president, chair of the Administration and Finance Committee, and then brought to the board for consideration.
Mr. Marks, just clarification, that is what as an agenda item for the next regular meeting, is that correct?
The request for the superintendent is that the superintendent would bring us a recommendation on the MFP task force for February, so that group can meet in a timely manner, with the expectation that the MFP task force would bring a recommendation back to BESI at the March 5th meeting.
Thank you.
I have a question.
What's that? Somebody else want to come?
Yes, Chairman,
Okay.
if you like, I would like to ask clarification on the list, Mr. Moore. You made a comment about SATs, non-public, and it's going to the superintendent for his review. I understand that SATs, non-public, are under BESI, so why is it going to the superintendent for review? I'm not, can you clarify, please?
Just asking for comment.
In regards to?
In regards to the makeup of the applicable committees where the superintendent would have input.
But does he have input on SATs or is board appointments?
Right.
We have board appointments.
Right. So I'm just asking that he would review and make recommendations where it's appropriate. So the ones where LDOE wouldn't appoint those memberships, it wouldn't be appropriate, so input wouldn't be.
So I guess my question is, LDOE has an appointment on SATs?
No, ma'am. I think each board member has 2 appointments on staff.
Yes, that's correct. And so I think what I'd like everyone to understand as board members that we have our appointments as my appointments will stay. And we have that right as board member to have those
The
appointments.
direction to the superintendent is only where it's appropriate. So in the case you're outlining, it would be appropriate for the superintendent to comment.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So as I appreciate this, basically what I'm doing for the February meeting is working alongside here officers, administration, finance chair, the BESI office for consideration of MFP task force members. And then for the March meeting, all of these other groups to bring forward a recommendation on membership for those groups, which will be an agenda item. And to Ms. Holloway's point, if I'm talking about SAC, for instance, for her appointees, I would reach out and I would say, Ms. Holloway, like, who do you choose to be your appointees? And those would remain on the committee, the SAC.
Okay. I think to maybe a positive message out there, because, we've received a lot of calls, texts last night about these committees, and people are assuming that everything's going to be wiped out, everything's going to be slate, and they're going, what's going on? And superintendent's in my district. I'm just saying my district. So we just need to make sure it's clarified about what's taking place.
Yeah, for me, my response to that would be for the superintendent advisory council, you make your appointment. You make your appointment, and you may choose, as I appreciate it, you may choose to leave your existing appointments, or you may choose to change those, but that would be up to you.
Any other comments?
Question. So could I have a clarification on the non-public council?
Right. My understanding is that there are no changes there. Haven't received any feedback from any members with regard to any changes. And that one will be completed in addition to the one that was approved today for early childhood education.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Is there any, I'm sorry, the motion's been placed, and is there, okay. Are there any objections to the motion? No objections heard, so the motion carries. Next.
Your next item is on page 40, item 7.1, consideration of revisions to Bessie Code/AG operations in response to House Resolution 256 of the 2023 regular legislative session regarding posthumous diplomas. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Roman?
Do you want to seek?
Oh, we need a motion, I'm sorry. We have a motion. Second?
Yes, sir. So this particular item is simply in response to legislation that deals with the ability to award diplomas to students who have passed. And so there are some regulations on how a school system might consider doing this, but it does give the opportunity for school systems to be able to award to a family a diploma for a student who has deceased, who is a member of that particular graduation cohort. And so this is in response to the act of the legislature, and certainly we recommend its approval.
Thanks. Do we have anybody in the audience wish to comment? Anybody? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any objections? No objections heard. The motion carries. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 42, item 7.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1566, Pupil Progression Policies and Procedures regarding third grade students with a reading deficiency. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Okay, do we have a motion? A motion, second.
Second.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Norman?
Yes, sir. So this particular item, as we all are aware, has been a point of discussion for the state of Louisiana for a few years now. It relates to third grade retention for students who are not at a certain level with their reading abilities by the end of third grade. A little bit of background here. This particular piece of legislation was authored at the time by Representative Richard Nelson from the North Shore area. And in the first year that he attempted to pass this legislation, because of the timeline of where it landed in the session, he was unable to get this particular legislation through the full process. But he, at that point, said he intended to bring it back around the next year, and he, in fact, did do that and was able to pass this particular piece of legislation, and the governor, in fact, signed this legislation. And so what we have been doing for some time now as an agency is reaching out to various groups that are concerned or have expertise in this particular work. We have brought this to various councils for their consideration so that they could look at that. And we wanted to be very intentional about giving plenty of runway for discussion, because we believe this is a very substantive piece of policy for this particular board, and we think it's probably hopefully exciting for you to be able to consider this at your first meeting. Throughout the course of discussions on this particular item, One of the things that was talked about was the fact that previously there were not a lot of interventions in place and opportunities in place, particularly around the science of reading, intervention, extension, high dosage tutoring, that now exists today because of a series of legislation that has passed over the last 3 years that sets students up for success. And so hopefully we will, as time moves on, have less and less students who even fall into this particular category. But obviously there's been a lot of interest in this particular piece of legislation. It has been talked about a great deal in coffee shops and in the media. And we feel like as an agency, we have done our due diligence to engage a number of stakeholders, a number of councils, a number of committees to put this in its appropriate posture for your consideration here today. And with that, we certainly do recommend its approval.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
If it's appropriate to comment,
Pardon?
is it appropriate to comment?
Yes, I was just going to follow.
Mr. Superintendent, thank you for your comments, and I agree with a lot of folks that this is incredibly important legislation. And there's some competing data out there, as we all know, in terms of the timing. That it's critically important that young people are able to learn at an early age, and I applaud the department for all of its work in terms of putting those early safeguards in as much as possible. The legislation specifically references third grade and sort of enabling legislation in some measure. But there's another school of thought that if you're trying to intervene at an earlier age, that perhaps the decision to retain a child at maybe first grade or second grade might be more helpful to the child, the family, and in terms of outcomes. And because this legislation, we're following the law here, is there anything that prevents Bessie from a policy standpoint from actually doing what some of the scholarships suggest, that perhaps holding back a child earlier as opposed to waiting to the third grade? Understanding, again, the law requires that once you get to third grade. But from a policy standpoint, do we have the authority to take it a step further, which I think is in part the intent with the work of the department, to have those earlier interventions to go into place. But one, do we have the authority, given some thought to it, and there's something we could do about it?
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Castillo, as you are aware, and we've had these discussions, there was a great deal of conversation, particularly with the bill author, on what the appropriate grade level would be for this particular measure and the potential retention. And particularly there was conversation around first grade. And would first grade be a more appropriate time frame for this retention to take place for a number of reasons, social and other ones. But at the end of the day, the bill author felt like that third grade was the grade where he wanted to see this point of retention, if necessary. And so regarding your question, what I would say is we are happy to research that, look at that, have conversations with you beyond this point and see what additional steps we might could take. But what we're trying to do at this point is just comply with the law as it's written, after having given conversation with a number of groups, individuals, and organizations to make sure we can put it in the best place possible for you today. But if that is a conversation you'd like to have, I'm certainly willing to engage with you on that conversation beyond today.
And just to be clear, that I understand it's the law, and you certainly want to comply with the law. And the question, and it may be a legal question, and so it's quite appropriate to say that the department would research it, but the question is, in light of that spirit, can we take it a step further? Would it be appropriate to try to stem the number of students in third grade by perhaps in trying to have earlier interventions, maybe have some language around how do we ensure that we prevent the large number of students that might be retained by perhaps doing it earlier? Would without doing violence to the original law as it's been presented to us that we absolutely have to comply with. Do we have that authority? That may be a conversation with the department's counsel and maybe Bessie counsel.
I think it would be a question for Bessie Council, if that's appropriate, and, we could do that. But I would just offer beyond today, I'm more than willing to have a conversation about what that could look like.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, please.
is it in my understanding that if the child is not reading proficiently at grade level, say first or second, that they would automatically be promoted to the next grade?
No, so students in kindergarten, first and second grade do not automatically promote. So teachers in those grades, based on the success of the student over the course of the year, would make this decisions, which could be retention at kindergarten, first or second grade. Yes, sir, even without an additional policy provision.
May I?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and actually, Dr. Brumley, this is what I wanted to ask, if you could share that with the board members, indicating that the pupil progression plan is across all districts. Minimum requirements are from the department, SE policy, and that there are some things already in place for retention, okay, first, second, due to the fact that most districts have, if they don't pass reading, they fail. So you may want to add to that.
Right, and that is historically,
Yeah.
that has historically been the case within the pupil progression plan of local school systems, that they make those decisions based on what is outlined in their pupil progression plan on promotion or retention. And that's been the case for a long time. So that is in fact true, Ms. Holloway. I also wanted to point out one of the additions that we made to this policy beyond some of the approvals and nods from councils and groups is we did add a reporting section to the policy just so that annually we would produce a report that basically tells you the number of students that are being retained, what their levels are. We can do that by LEA, demographic, et cetera, just to be able to provide this board with additional information around how this policy is playing out within the local school systems.
Any other comments? I just have a question. It seems to me that if you're measuring children's performance in kindergarten, especially, but perhaps in first grade, a lot of that results from where they come from in the home. The school system hasn't perhaps had enough time to impact their growth in reading, whereas by the time you get to the third grade, perhaps that's a point where you can see measurable progress. But again, it's a philosophical question, I suppose. I think that's something that we should continue discussion. I've always been concerned about so many Louisiana children coming out of homes and not being ready for school. And that's why we spent, at least when I was in the legislature, we spent so much time on early childhood education. And I just don't know whether the experts could tell us whether a kindergarten or a first grade measurement would be statistically accurate as relates to their education in the school setting. So, but I certainly would welcome further discussion. Thank you.
To Mr. Appel's point, and Mr. Bergen, I caught completely what you were saying, and it's a good point as well, and that is, we currently have a process in place in terms of pupil progression where at any grade, you certainly can make the decision to retain a child. But this legislation is incredibly important and has been presented and made a law for a reason, and that is to really sort of highlight the importance of literacy. And it's critically important, and for those of you who are watching the work of this board and the department, there's been a great deal of emphasis on early childhood education as well. But because this has such great consequences, I think it is an ongoing conversation that we need to have. And to the extent that there is data that can be shared with us so that we're as completely informed as possible, because we think we're making a good decision now, but as we get more information, I think it's important to continue to revisit those outcomes and whether this is working, to the extent should we be tweaking it in some way. But generally, legislation creates law, then we're asked as the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to shape policy that may better refine laws that are created. And so I think to the extent that we can continue to revisit, have this incredibly important conversation, build on the great work that's already been put in place, I think we'll just be better served, to your point, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Castillo. I want to agree with you and use your same language. This is incredibly important. And that's, also to your point, that's why we, within the last week to 2 weeks, added the reporting requirement to give this board more data to make informed decisions moving forward. So if you couple that data report with, frankly, just reading level data that will be seen over the next few years, I think that will help inform the board. Look, we think that our approach to reading, particularly in the elementary grades, is the right approach. It's based on the science of reading. We're seeing some early signs of that. And so what we as a department have to do here is we often have to strike the balance with educators and systems of saying, look, we want to celebrate the success. We're making movement. We think that this is the right approach. But we also have to continue to say, but we're not there. And we have to push because expectations are high of what our students in the state of Louisiana need and deserve. And so we have to strike this balance of celebrate success, but also at the same time not accept that as finality and keep pushing to drive so that we can get better outcomes.
Well said, strongly agree.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of clarification, I was not disagreeing with you. I wholeheartedly do agree with you.
Great.
Look at it.
I'm winning today.
Not for long. Anyway, one last point of personal privilege. We have to do the same thing for mathematics, guys. I mean, reading is extraordinarily important, so is math. So just as we go forward, we're going to have the same conversation over and over again about math. Okay, Amber Jackson, I believe you'd like to come forward.
Hello, me again. I loved what you had to say, and it kind of has to do with what I came prepared to say. While I agree, reading very, very, very important, and I understand wanting to hold students back, the necessity of when the students are behind needing to hold them back. Unfortunately, since our grade levels are age groups, there does become this social stigmatization, stigma, thank you, of the student that's a whole year older than everybody else in their class. And this student that got held back, oh, I did homework in the third grade. It's almost an embarrassing thing. They feel like they failed. When it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't mean they don't have to be held back. I mean, they don't have to be in necessarily same age groups. If it were normalized, perhaps, that students did their reading in ability groups or groups of interest throughout the day, that would also be a good mediation for students in the entire elementary setting. So if students from kindergarten to third grade are mixed grouping, you can meet every student where they're at instead of at an age level, and it could really help students, it could really help remediating the kindergarten through 7th grade until you're getting to that point where you have to make the decision to hold them back or not. So if you guys are going to continue this conversation, I urge you to look into the plentiful research that shows that mixed age groups are very beneficial for students, especially in the elementary setting, and there are other countries that are doing this in their elementary settings. And on a side note, you all were mentioning teachers making recommendations to hold students back. In my experience teaching, none of the students I recommended to be held back actually got held back. So how do you, there's room for improvement there in holding schools accountable for just passing students for their SPN scores. If they have too many failures, they feel like they're gonna not look good. They don't want to upset parents.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sure.
So we put our recommendations for failures on a piece of paper and turn it into the principal, but if there were a way that teachers could report their recommendations for failure straight to the state, you can monitor who is or isn't taking their teacher recommendations.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make one comment. Thank you for yours. I have the same belief that teachers would not make certain recommendations at the early ages. And when my kids were growing up, I had some assumptions. But I've since come to learn that particularly at some of the more elite schools, that there are not only recommendations that children, depending on maturity level, academic achievement level, particularly at the kindergarten age, be held back. And in fact, parents support that as a shared decision. For a long time, I had believed that that was a bad idea, and I've learned that why parents choose to do that, and teachers do that, and a lot more do it that I've realized, particularly in what I would consider some of the more elite schools here in the state, and I suspect that's true around the country. So just wanted to pass that along, that some parents really make that conscious decision that's interesting. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler.
The idea, I guess, ultimately is if the students are used to being in mixed age groups, they're used to being around students of other ages at all times or on a daily basis, maybe part of the day, it's not so stigmatizing to be in a different age group or to be held back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any objection to the motion? No objection, the motion carries. Next item.
Next item is on page 45, item 7.3, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1922, compliance monitoring procedures regarding special education corrective action plans. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Okay, we have a motion. She makes a motion. Ms. Champagne seconds.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. So we have been working as certainly Ms. Holloway, Mr. Morris, Mr. Castillo, and the rest of the board will soon know, we have been working for some time to improve some of our practices around special education students with exceptionalities, family support and access, and we feel like we've made some really good steps in that endeavor. One of the suggested improvements that we are making has to do with if we find that a local school system has a significant deficit area in special education, or we find a pattern historically that a local school system is not meeting compliance rules, we have the provision to assign a special management team, what we're calling a special master, to that particular setting. To oversee some of the practices to help make sure that they get in line from a compliance standpoint. One of the challenges that presently exists in policy, which I'm hoping you'll help us overcome today, is that at present, if we want to assign a special management team to go in and provide oversight for some of the compliance issues relative to special education, the local school system has to approve our placement of that individual. And so what we're suggesting to do here today, and this is something that some of us have talked about for some time, is to remove that particular requirement so that we can assign this special management team to oversee special ed compliance issues without having to seek the approval of the system for whom is providing the challenges around compliance to begin with. So that's what this particular policy does.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, do we have any objections to the motion? There being no objections, the motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 47, item 7.4, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to Act 266 of the 2023 regular legislative session regarding dyslexia screening. The recommendation is to approve as notice of intent revisions to bulletins 741 and 1903.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for approval? Second.
So what this particular item does, again, this is to Chairman Appel's point, we talked about math and conversations we need to have around math moving forward. Mr. Castillo mentioned additional conversations around reading. I think more conversations will be warranted by this board around this levy in the next few years. This is an area that does need more attention. Our legislature did pass a requirement, Act 266, that says kindergarten students in the state of Louisiana in the second half of the school year will receive dyslexia screening. There's also additional requirements here around reporting, public reporting of this information. And so much like the retention policy, this is simply an alignment with statute, and we're bringing it here for you today for your consideration.
Okay, any comments or questions from the board? See none, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any objections? No objections, the motion carries. Do we have anything further?
That concludes the agenda.
Thank you. Yes.
5 minutes for AF. We'll begin AF in 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you all for